Strindberg was part of many movements, but the work that he produced for the Expressionist movement was revolutionary. At the time when Strindberg moved from naturalism to Expressionism, he, like many other artists of the time, was stuck in the middle of a conflict. There was a shift in the world and in culture. The field of science was becoming more prominent, and control of religious institutions was crumbling. Strindberg spent most of his time questioning truth. He was tormented by the idea of, how do we know we were right? So when religion could not give him truth, he turned away from it. However, as an artist, he was still highly influenced by religious institutions, because they gave life meaning and morals. It was this shift to science that made Strindberg turn to psychology and the study of the psyche, where he turned out many autobiographical materials. He, however, realized that most of science was not as substantial as he thought, and gave little answers to his questions. He was stuck in the middle of these two movements. Religion gave morals and guidelines, and science objectified and dehumanized. Neither movement gave answers or meanings to his questions, so he brought the immeasurable task of creating a universe where cultural classes were at peace. He began to work on imagining the world, but was still torn between the discourse that ravaged society, and thus his work became another larger oxymoron of the two poles of society. His work turned out as a distorted view pulling in many directions, and there was little resolution. A strong characteristic of Strindberg's writing is his apathy towards his own problems. He acknowledges their existence but does nothing to move them along. The same can be seen in his expressionistic writing. Strindberg creates a world of discourse and pulls from both sides of culture towards the importance of religion and the importance of science. He, however, does not offer any solutions to these problems in society. His writings of this time, namely To Damascus, A Dream Play, and The Ghost Sonata, give a dreamlike state feeling that can turn from dream to nightmare quickly and rational to fantastical almost instantaneously. But they do not resolve with an ending. The work is rhythmic yet chaotic and gives little hope. Since rhythm would represent organization, Strindberg makes sure that it clashes in on itself. Strindberg's Expressionism marks the movement from traditional art to art being able to change the cultural atmosphere. Strindberg's Expressionism was the response to a situation that was almost impossible for artists. He felt the urge to create, or, as he himself put it, he felt rhythms coming. Yet there was nothing to rhythmize except chaos, disappointment, and hope so faint that it could be mistaken for despair. His work called for the disconnect of logical forms of dreaming. Conventions of reality such as time and space need to be shed. This new form was almost a superrealism in that it depicted dreams, experiences, fantasies, and absurdities. It was a study of the human experience looking from the inside out. It was Strindberg's attempt to show the inside of someone's internal conflicts, something we know on a personal level, but not yet to be perceived on the stage. That is, until Strindberg. To place Strindberg's expressionistic movement in time, it is important to look at the other famous figures and movements that led up to this time. During Strindberg's earlier career, Ibsen and Shaw were two of the most prolific playwrights. Ibsen is said to have kept a portrait of Strindberg at his desk to motivate him to write, as Ibsen saw Strindberg as his mortal enemy. The writings of both Shaw and Ibsen are strongly realistic, and only Ibsen's later work shows signs of expressionism. The difference between Strindberg and the works of Ibsen and Shaw is that neither of these writers threw themselves and their mental health into their work like Strindberg did. Strindberg would use himself as such a fountain of information concerning the human condition, and it was through this push for the ultimate realism that Strindberg realized expressionism. We focus on Strindberg's work in the expressionistic movement because he really began the movement. In his earlier work, Strindberg would go with the flow, making sure that his work was relevant to the most recent movement in theater. It is expressionism that he was ahead of the movement and actually led the way for it to happen. Strindberg's work led a movement not only in the theater, but in art as well. Something not well known about Strindberg is that he was also an accomplished painter. His writing style was reflected in his paintings as well. The Expressionist movement was one of the first times when art actually had a significant influence on culture. Previously in history, art and theater followed the movement of society. Expressionism was so revolutionary that it set the pace for change not only within the arts community, but held influence through every facet of society. The Ghost Sonata is an excellent example of Strindberg's expressionist plays, as it is a part of his chamber collection, a collection of plays performed with small cast and little to no costume or set. If it were easy to summarize Ghost Sonata, then it wouldn't be an expressionist play. But, essentially, the play examines anguish and brutality of existence. Set in a dreamlike state, almost as though the characters were in purgatory, the characters simply reveal the facades of life hidden behind upper class and show the lowest level of human existence. The old man tells the story of each character living in the house that the student envies. Each story of each character living in the house becomes more and more sordid, revealing more and more of the facade as it goes. The Ghost Sonata also has many Strindbergian details, such as an ending that gives off the slightest hint of hope and then leads to mistreatment and the death of the girl, and also the contradictions of class. Another characteristic of Expressionism is the distorted feeling of a fairy tale. The story's protagonist, the student, comes to learn about life, but then he falls in love with a beautiful girl who is locked up in the house. The old man helps the young man reach the girl, but as Strindberg would have it, it is the young man who comes to realization that she is not what he expected. It is this disconnect from dream and then a shift to reality that makes this piece expressionistic. The play has a constant feel of wandering, yearning, and searching for something. Each character, dead or alive, is still yearning for something. The spirits walk with the living, searching just as strongly with the living as they once did when they were alive. There is no resolution and no real plot within the play. All of the characters are dealing with the internal emotions, and the whole play centers around depicting them. The expressionist view is life is illusion, guilt and pain, but a time will come when God will redeem mankind and put an end to suffering and death. Expressionism tries to find the logic in dreams and express the internal anguish of a character for all to see, all the while ignoring the conventions of realistic storytelling, such as a plot. The Ghost Sonata is a prime example of Strindberg's examination of the human condition and need to mess with the natural pattern of life. Right when you think as an audience member that you can say what is going to happen, the illogical happens, and that is Expressionism.